Hey guys, Matt Wenning at WenningStrength.com, and today we're going to talk about another topic that's very similar to the one we just talked about, which is key tips for getting stronger. So there are some differences between getting stronger and getting bigger, okay? And I want to go over those. The first thing is we need to have a plan. The next thing is we need technique before intensity. And the last thing we need, which a lot of people are faulting, is patience. So let's get to it.
Lately I've been living like I can't take a loss. They ain't wanna help me, that's what made me a boss. You can't kill my confidence, I think I'm the man. We don't give a f, that's what they don't understand. I'm back again like flu season. I broke records while loose leafing. I'm coming down my roof, leaving. Don't give a f, I don't care. Did the by my lonesome. No wonder now I'm on one. No shortcuts on that long run. All I really want is my share.
Okay, so in a previous video we talked about how to get bigger, which I think applies to a lot of people. In my particular wheelhouse, obviously getting bigger was a key component, but I was already a big guy. So for me, I wanted to be as strong as I could be. And obviously as a powerlifter, sometimes you want to be as strong as you can be with as light as you can be. That changes a lot of different factors on how you're going to train. It's going to include a lot more neurological stimulation and things of that nature. But to keep it simple today, we're going to talk about some key things that I think most people are faltering in order to get stronger. One, you need to have a plan. I don't know how many people come into the gym. I'm like, well, what have you been doing the last 6 months to get stronger? And they're like, well, I've been doing a little of this, a little. They have no plan. The point is that if you were to come to WenningStrength.com and look at Train Heroic or Patreon, those things are heavily skilled out. They're laid out in 12 and 15 week cycles to make sure that we are optimizing and building up that. The point is, when you're getting bigger, you can actually train, in my opinion, a little bit dumber, because you don't need to worry about overtraining as much. If your major goal is just to get bigger, then what's it matter if you're sore and beat up all the time? Well, I'm here to tell you that if you're trying to get stronger, it's all about recuperation neurologically, whereas in getting bigger, it's more about recuperation physically. Neurological beatdown and training is massive in either getting stronger or getting weaker, plateauing, and even causing a lot of problems with overtraining. So the key is, if you have a plan, it's much, much harder to overtrain, because usually people with plans tend to slightly ramp things up over longer periods of time versus trying to ram it down their throat right off the rip. They're training sporadically and the volume is just not consistent enough. When you're getting stronger, it's all very, very important to plan out what you're doing every training cycle, every training week and month, broken into mesocycles. If you go onto WenningStrength.com and look at the manuals, we have broken these things down into waves that are not only applicable, but also adaptable. And that's where it's very, very important to have a plan. The next thing that you have to really, really focus on if you want to be super strong is that you need to put technique before intensity. This is really, really hard because, we get on the internet, we look on Instagram, we see people that are the top lifters in the world, or we think are really, really strong. And a lot of times, even some of the guys that I would consider intermediate and advanced have poor technique. How do you know they have poor technique? Because watch. If you guys look around today at who's doing big stuff, let's see if they're around in 2 to 4 years. If they don't have technique that's solid, then what you're going to start finding is the injuries are going to accumulate so fast that they're not going to be able to stick around very long, and they're going to be a flash in the frying pan. Most guys that are in the sport for more than a decade tend to have much, much better technique than the guys that are flashes in the frying pan. Now, how do we focus on technique before intensity? Well, that's hard, because that means we have to set our ego back a little bit, and we have to focus on what we call technical force maximums. Now, the Russians figured this out many, many years ago. There's two different types of maxing. You have training force maximums, which are things you can do every day, usually around 90%, which I feel is optimal. And that is meaning that you go as far as you can go while holding technique. The other thing that's important about that is if you would go to a technical max, a TFM, usually you can recover from that. Now there's another side to that most people should save for, I would say, every 4 to 6 months or every competition that they do, and that's competitive or comp force max. Comp force max is, I'm going for the gold, I don't care if my form breaks down a little bit, and I'm going to push through it as hard as I can. That's needed occasionally, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a high risk of injury for a lot of people. And if your technique is not solid, you're going to have a huge problem. So I say stay away from the competition maximums and stay in technical maximums where it's all about holding technical proficiency. The next big thing that you have to understand with training is you have to be patient if you want to be strong. I'll give you a case in point. When I was 21 years old, I squatted my first 700-pound squat. I think it was like 722. Now, when I did that, there was a legend at that meet named Ed Cohen. And Ed Cohen, for many, was one of the greatest powerlifters to ever live, broke over 70 world records. And he's told me at this time, hey, man, if you can hold on for another 6 to 8 years, you're going to squat over 800 pounds. Well, for some people, that would be a huge detriment. What do you mean? I got to train another like 6 or 8 years to squat 800? Well, yeah, I did. Now, here's the thing. I went much farther past that in 6 or 8 years. But the key was I was in it for the long haul anyway. So if somebody would have told me it would have took me 20 more years to squat 900, I would have done it. Now, in equipment, I peaked at 1200 on the squat, and in raw, I peaked at 865. So obviously, I broke those numbers. The point being is that it's all about patience. If you have patience, then your body will adapt the way it's supposed to adapt. It will allow the ligaments and tendons and bones to keep up and catch up with the muscle tissue as you're training. That's why a lot of people run into huge issues taking anabolic steroids too soon. Anabolic steroids are awesome at building muscle tissue and making you much stronger, upwards of, I would say, 8 to 10%. But the problem is that ligaments and tendons don't catch up as fast. That means that a lot of people that take anabolic steroids too soon tend to have a lot of injuries and things they just cannot overcome. The other big thing that I want to mention on that is think about in this perspective. If we know the anabolic steroids, and I'm just being like theoretical, if they give us 10% strength gains, why in the fuck will we take that at 225 bench press? That means we're going to bench 250 taking drugs. Whereas if I was already benching 500, now I would bench 550. That's a pretty decent margin and pretty world class. The point is that I think a lot of people need to stay away from anabolic steroids. We've been getting a lot of questions on those. Stay away from them and at least get to a proficient level as something before you even consider those particular things. If you need more help, go on our Patreon channel, look at our programs on Train Heroic, and check out our manuals where we talk about this a little bit more in depth. If I were going to try to be stronger and I was going to get a manual, I would look at the powerlifting manual, and I would also look at the off-season manual to make sure that you're not specifically training too often and burning out. Talk to you guys later.
Lately I've been living like I